My screen is visible, right?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay, thank you. So, welcome everyone. So today we are having the 11th session. Oh, 10th session only. Like in that sequence, today we are having the 10th session. And till now we have learned a lot of things. This is what we are going to do next. But just as a basic recap, we have made two very basic games in Unity. We have learned a lot of how to use the interface of Unity, different concepts of different assets that are there, different components that are there in Unity. What are game objects? What are the different components that are attached to game object? We have dealt with some physics. We have dealt with movement. We have dealt with uh, screen-based movement in a very basic sense. We have not actually dealt with it, but we have used a package where we are able to use touchscreen as well. Then we have seen movement, all those things. We have seen collisions. We have seen some basic UI as well. And then obviously we have seen player prefs and a bit of coroutines also in the last session, I think we saw. So like the genre, like we haven't been in gameplay terms or in gameplay mechanics. Right now, what we have been building are uh, like we can call them casual games or hyper casual games, which are basically uh, there's no effort from the user in actually playing these games in a sense. And they have been very basic games with basic rules that have been there. So one of the most popular genres or mechanics that is there is in games is shooter games, and this is what we'll focus on next. So basically, shooter games can be of two types. In general, there are like obviously there's different types as well, but generally you will see in any game that you will get an option to either uh, view the scene as a first player view or as a third player view. So first player view is what you're seeing here right now, that you're not able to see yourself. You're basically seeing the game through the eyes of the character. So this is something called as first player view. Then there's third player view where you will be able to see the player as well. In the sense that the camera will be a bit behind the player. You'll be able to see the upper body of the player, the gun in the hands, all those things. So, and then there are other game types as well in shooters where something like a top-down view is there, where basically you have a maze kind of an environment and you have a top-down view of the player. So that is also part of third-person shooter on. So, what is the basic difference in these two is basically, as you can see in the video that is playing, is that you don't have to implement any animations or any characters of the player. You can just attach a gun near the camera and basically that works. The shooting is concept is a bit different. Right now, how the shooting is being done is like there's a small dot in the center of the screen. That is your crosshair, and that is the only point where the shooting is being done. In third person, you can basically attach it to your gun, like wherever the gun is pointing, there is where that is where the shooting is happening, which is not true in this case. But third person also generally it is the case that center of the screen is considered as crosshair. And in first person also, basically you can animate hands and you can animate feet. If you look down, you can do those things. It's possible to do, but yeah, a lot of games you don't necessarily need to do that. And in third person, basically you want the user to see the player character as well. So you'll animate the player characters and all those things. So what do we in the next few sessions? We'll so like similar to this video. This is from a tutorial. I'll show you what where this is and how we'll build it and what exactly are we trying to do. So our objective is to learn more concepts now, and basically not specifically focusing on shooter games. So, but we will use this concept, this game as a learning opportunity. And obviously, by the end of it, you might have two or three other games in your to showcase as well. You can build them as several different games. First person as a different game, second person, third person as a different game, and enemies can be of different kinds. So, like in this scene, it's like a zombie enemy. We can have robotic enemies or army, military enemies. So that, and then basically setting up the environment around it, which matches your uh, set, like which matches the theme that you want to set. So, like for a robotic army, you can have a more sci-fi kind of an environment. For a army kind of a warfare kind of a situation, you can have a battlefield, a desert kind of an environment. So these things you can implement while we do this. So hopefully in the next 3 to 4 sessions, we'll touch upon concepts that are core of the mechanics of shooter games, but also some other concepts that are important, like the input system that is there, coroutines that are there. Raycasting is mostly important for this kind of thing only, shooting only. But there are other use cases where you will use them in the future. So this is something that we'll do, and these are the things that I want to cover in today's session. Let's see how much we are able to cover. So let me first show you some of the things that we want to. So this is the tutorial kind of which FPS tutorial C Sharp. I'll share the link. This is an old tutorial from 2017, I think. Yeah, so 2017 videos are there in this, and basically the concept is like a bit old, like because Unity, I think they've used Unity 2017 or something. So now we are in 2021. So it'll not translate as is. A lot of things will not be implementable as is, but the core concept of how a shooting game is supposed to be, what are the different things, will be similar. And I'll walk you through some of these videos, some of these tutorials as well. Then one another channel which you should follow and you should look into is Brackeys. They don't make videos anymore. They've been stopped last year, I think. But they have a lot of different tutorials for a lot of different things. So this is another channel that you should go through. And a lot of the things that I will take up will be a combination of things, concepts from the FPS tutorial that I showed you. And when we talk about a specific concept, then that concept can be explored on
Sir is facing some internet issues. He would join us in few minutes.
Uh, Sorry about that. There's something went wrong with my internet. Just a second. So sorry about that. But let us continue. So basically, what we want to start doing today is build this scene, and there are a few things that I want to talk about, like starter assets and how the new input system is there, and some 3D sounds, coroutines, and then raycasting. Let's see how much we are able to cover. So talking about standard assets or starter assets. So this is basically what we used to have till like last year. Uh, and basically we used to have the standard assets not till last year, like maybe a few years back as well, for like, and they have stopped it, like the support that they have stopped is still Unity 2018.4, but it's still workable. There is a blog that is here that you can download this from here. There are a few things, like if you download this as is in your Unity 2020 version or 2021 version, there are a few errors that will pop up, which are like some libraries have changed paths and stuff. So you will need to fix that. But this is not what we'll be using. But I'm just showing to you this to you so that if you want, you can use it and you should explore it. It has a lot of great assets apart from just having a first person or a third person camera character, which we'll be seeing right now in our what is the new replacement of this kit. We'll see that. But this is something that you should try out. Just search for standard assets Unity and you will get this page and try to use it. If you have to use it, try it in the older version also. You'll be able to use it directly with some changes, like changes in code of 2 lines. There's a GUI text which is now UI text, so you can change that very easily. And one more change, I think those two are the major changes. So it has a lot of different assets like cars and uh, plane physics is there, so you can try those out. Yeah, and there are some other shade textures and shaders and particles also available, which you can try if you want. So these are the things that are available in this package. Uh, there are characters, which is first person character, third person character, the roller ball that we build. Then there's some effects are there, glass refraction, light flares, these things. If you want, you can try them out. They're nice to play around with. And then there's some particle systems which are still useful in some cases. You might want to use them. Some explosions are there, flares are there, and we also might probably take parts of this and use it somewhere else. Then there's vehicles are there. We have aircraft and car. In the 3D character, third person character, there's a prefab for AI third person controller, which basically it's a very cool concept. We'll also implement it. We'll implement some basic non-playing character AI as well, and then enemy AI. So how that reacts to what you're doing in the scene, things like that. And this is a good asset to explore. And this is a blog, like if you search, I'll share this link with you. But like this is something that you should explore. This basically tells you how to use the standard assets in Unity 2020 and above. Basically, they've created a separate zip file, which is a new asset file, and you can use this instead of downloading it from there. So they've changed it and accommodated it as per the new asset file. Next, coming to this environment that we'll be using. So this is a free environment in the Unity Asset Store. There are a lot of these small modular kind of environments that are available in Unity. By default, there's a lot of things available. So you can try this out and let's start. And I have not built a project, so we'll start with a new project. And I hope everyone is clear on these things still by now. What are we doing and when we are creating a new project, exactly what things are being created and stuff like that. So let's name this VIPS VR and shooter. While this is opening, so this is the environment that we'll be using. We'll import it and see this. And then this is something that we'll explore today first. These are the uh, replacement of the standard assets, at least just for the first person and the third person character controller. So these are starter assets for the first person character controller. And then we have starter assets for the third person character controller. And this is something that we'll be using. And what are like, why has this changed? Why is the Unity has changed from an old system to a new system? What have they added? So they have added some basic like these environment stuff where you can test prototype and test it easily. But more importantly, the major change that is there is in the input system. So like the input system that we have used till now was something that you can call it as a device-based input system. So if you remember that we used to specifically write in the code that input.get button or get key, like when we were using creating the left and right movement for the ball in our last game, we used to write input.get key W or input.get axis horizontal. So that was specific to the keyboard that we were using or specific to a device. And when we use, like, let's say when we want to use mouse button, we used to write input dot get key down mouse, right? Something like that. So I forgot the exact thing. But basically it was device dependent, and basically that was the old input or the legacy input package, what we call now, is a device based input package. I think this has opened. So yeah. So let me just import this one and then we'll continue. Think not able to log in. Yeah. So, um, so this is the one that we want, 3D free modular kit. Oh, I think I went somewhere else. And import and import. So yeah, so I was talking about these starter assets. So yeah, so what has changed is the input system. So we have a new input system in place, which is basically an action-based input system. So we'll see how that works as compared to what we have been doing till now. So this is done. So this is the scene that is there. Let's just check out their test map. This is the scene that's there. So let me turn off these noise and turn off lighting. So this is I use scene lighting. So this is how this environment, it's a small environment, but this is how it looks. And we'll try to use this for separate various things. And what we can do, because it's a modular environment, we can add like this whole thing. Like there's a gate towards the end of here, and there's a gate here. So what we can do is we can make a duplicate of this, make a copy of this, and add this gate over here and make it more extendable. So if you want, we can create the environment into a bigger environment as well, even like just replicating it again and again, that sort of way. So let me just make a prefab of this that we will be using. And let's bring it in our scene. Just give me a second. I think my headphones are about to go off. I will change the mic. Are you guys able to hear me?
Yes, sir.
You're audible.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, back to this. We'll be using this scene and prefab. Let's just drop it here. It's 0, 0, 0. Everything is fine. Let's see if everything is as it should be. Yeah, so run this out. It's a bit more brighter because I think we will have to take the lights, but it will work for now. So this is the environment that we'll be using. And we can delete the directional light because there are light inside the environment that is basically lighting up the whole environment. So this looks better, right? And then next what we want is basically we want to import the starter assets to see around, like to walk around. So we'll try both the things. The first person starter asset. And as well as the third person starter asset we'll import. And we'll see a few things. We'll see a few new things as well. I think before we move on to 3D sound, we'll talk about something known as Mixamo. I'll just as it here, Mixamo for 3D character. So this is something that we'll talk about today. Yeah, so I was talking about the new input system. So what new input system has basically given us is an action-based system where basically your script or whatever you write is not device dependent. There's a key binding or an action mapping that is created when we are coding or when we are doing this, when we are initially doing it. So, okay. Yeah, so this, when you import this one, this will give you a warning that this project is using the new input system package, but the native platform backends for the new input system are not enabled in the player settings. This means that no input from the native devices will come through. So this basically means that if you don't press yes right now, you will not be able to use the new input system. If you do this, you will be able to, you will switch from the old input system to the new input system. We'll do yes, and then I'll show you in the settings how, where exactly is this restart changing things. This should be quick. So we added the first person character. Let me just quickly add the third person controller as well, and then we can go ahead. So I think we imported the third person first. Now we'll just import the first person then. Okay, so that's it, that's done. And if you see now in assets folder, we have a new folder called as starter assets. And in this we have some folders that are there, like first person is there, third person is there, mobile input is there, some files for the key mapping that I was talking about. This is where the key mapping is there, and we'll talk about this as well. Then I told you that we'll see where in the settings this has changed. So this is one way to go to that, and this is the other way. We'll go through here. So in project settings, we'll see the player settings. In other settings, this thing is active input handling, and this you see has changed to input system package is the new package. Then we have the input manager. This was the old manager, and then we can also do both, but it's better because when we are switching to the new input system, so it's better to use this one only, so that we'll create everything for this specific system only, and we don't go back to using the legacy systems. And why this input system is useful and important to learn is because every input in the new XR interaction toolkit or things that you will implement in the AR toolkits would be based on this new input system. So at least for VR, it's very important that you understand exactly how this input system is working. I'll share some extra resources if required. And if you see here at the top, there's an input manager. This is the old one. And then there's an input system package. This is the new one that we have. So in the input manager, I think I've shown this to you before, that we had horizontal axis, vertical axis, fire, jump, all these things. And in the input system package, we have these are just the settings for the package, but we define the key bindings in a separate package, in a separate this thing asset. This is the input actions that we define. This is where we define the key bindings, like the horizontal and vertical things that were defined here. Here we'll define actions like move, jump, things like that, which will be similar to what we have been doing there, but this is a bit better, not a bit, a lot better system actually. So next, moving on to actually seeing how this works is basically what we want to do is now let's use the third person character or the first person character that we have. So to include that, there are two ways that you can do it. One is basically we have the starter assets. You can go in the first person, you can go to prefabs, and these are the things that are there. So for including it in your scene, you will have to include the main camera, the player capsule, and the player follower. These three things you will include in your scene, and then this would work for you. Or what you can do is basically go to tools, starter assets, and reset first person controller. This will basically do the same thing. this includes 3 of these packages, 3 of these prefabs in your scene. Just a second. So this, and again, this is one more new thing that has been added here, is basically, let me go back here and delete this again. And I've deleted my main camera also once to show that how that camera is also added as a new asset. So this thing, and my main camera is also now added from the new using the first person starter assets also. So now there's one more along with the new input system. This starter asset package is dependent on another package which is called as the Cinemachine package. So Cinemachine package is a package which has more camera functionalities than the camera that is provided to you by default by Unity. So this is basically why there's 2 cameras that are there that you see. So there's a player follower camera which has a virtual camera attached to it. So this basically tells this is basically the back end of how this is working, and we have a follow follow function is here, which basically tells which thing the camera has to follow. And you can see that we have the player camera route here. So in the player capsule, this is what the camera will be following. And what is the actual real camera? It's still the main camera that we have. So this is what we have created till now. So this is our player for the first person player. And basically, if we want, I can just go and play, and I'll be in the scene and I'll be able to walk and everything. So player aspect. So as you can see, I'm able to walk around and everything is easy. I'm able to jump. When I press shift, I'm able to run as well. So like you can see the change in speed. This is walk, this is run. And this is basically by default, I'm able to do this just by adding my player character inside the scene. Now let us have a look at what exactly is the player first person character actually has, or how is this happening. So this character has a few components attached to it. One is a character controller. So this character controller is kind of like a capsule only. So which defines few different things for the character controller to be able to move in the environment, like slope limit, which is basically what kind of like a 45-degree slope can be actually moved by the player. A step offset, so 0.25, if there's a height of 0.25, that the player will not have to jump, will be able to walk as is. If the height is more than 0.25, then the player will have to jump. Then skin weights, minimum move distance, these things are like as is, you can understand, height of the player, radius of the player, all these things that are there. Then there's another script attached. So this was a component. This is a component in Unity, standard component in Unity, character controller. And if you want to create your own character controller, if you want to create your own person, like a first person or third person, this is what you'll use also. So like if you want to do everything from scratch also, this is character controller will be used. And next we have a script, which is a first person controller. So this is the actual controller script, where you can see the speed is defined, movement speed is defined, sprint speed is defined, rotation speed is defined, jump height is defined, gravity is defined. So a lot of things are defined. And this is where most of the things are happening. And basically the camera is also defined. The target for the camera is also defined. So all the things are defined in this. Then we have a basic rigid body push. So this is a function on how much strength does the player have to push other objects around in the scene. So this is an extra thing that can be looked at. Then there's a starter assets inputs, which is basically the actual function which is calling all the inputs. We'll look at this now. And then there's a player input. So this is the input class, which basically is the actual thing that is making the player input, that is converting the player inputs from the actions, like the key bindings that I told you about, and we'll see how that works, to something in the script. So this is mapping between the actions that we defined, and whenever that thing is pressed, it will basically send a message to something in the script. And there are different methods of sending messages. So this has these components are there. So actions may, what is the action input action asset that we saw earlier? This is there. What is this? So when I double click it, this is the action that opens up. So action maps, I can have various action maps that are there. So suppose I have a game in which my player can walk, run, all those things, and then he can drive a car, he can fly a plane, he can swim, or he can control a boat, all those things. So like these are 4 or 5 different actions. So what I can do is create 5 different action maps for different conditions. So when I am walking, when I'm on a road, I'll use the player road action map. When I'm in a helicopter, I'm flying a helicopter, I can use player helicopter action map. And inside those action maps, I'll define actions. So what are the actions right now that I have is move, look, jump, and sprint. And for this action map, for this action, what are the properties that are there? I have action type, which is a value. It can be a button or a pass-through. Value is basically what kind of value would be anything like a vector 2 or a vector 3, like actual value is being passed and not just a state is being passed. Then there's a button. Button is basically a state is being passed, like on off kind of a situation, Boolean kind of a situation, where if I just want to check if a specific button has been pressed or not, I'm not concerned about the continuous value of that. So like for movement, if you remember, we want a continuous value of a button being pressed for a long period of time, right? So how do we check that value? Then we can take a value and then we can take a vector 2. So vector 2 will give us a, we'll see what action is there inside this. So we have WASD in vector 2. So WASD may we have up is W, down is S, left is A, right is D, and then up, left, down, right again. So similarly, we'll talk what this is as well. So these are bindings. So this was action. Inside action, we have action properties. In properties, we have we basically have 2 things that are defined: action type and control type. So control type, what we are doing right now is for movement, we have action type as value and control type as vector 2. And in action type, what other things are there? Value and button and pass through. Value, you understand, button is basically on and off, true or false kind of a thing. And then pass through is also similar to value, but it does not check which device or which specific action binding it is going through. So value would check that if your like the input is coming from a specific device, but you don't have to concern with pass through right now. You will mostly use value or button. And then there are control types, which are basically these things like what we already also used. Like we used axis, horizontal or vertical axis. We used vector 2, we used vector 3 for defining directions of movement and force. So things like that. And then inside each action, there's going to be a binding. And this binding is what basically is actually for different devices. So for keyboard, we have this WASD binding. For a gamepad, we have this left stick of a gamepad binding. That's all we had to do here was write basically left stick. And whatever value that comes from that left stick, X and Z would basically come, Y would not come. So that is why it's a vector 2. X and Z of this would basically translate to movement vector 2 values, and based on that we will be able to move. So if I had to write code of all this, then I had to basically create a if statement, if this device is connected, and then if this device is connected, then use WASD and arrow keys. If this device is connected, then use left stick of the gamepad. I could have written these codes in the old system as well, but this is what it would have looked like. And then if I want to add more
controls for move. Like let's say I want to use the same map in VR as well or something somewhere else as well, then I can basically come here and I want to use a touchscreen wala thing. Then I can do this. That's I can use for touchscreen as well. I can write for XR as well. So XR, I can write XR left hand controller. There's a joystick. If you have seen XR controllers, there's in some there's joystick, in some there's touchpad, in some there's both. So let's say I want to add left joystick in my whenever I play this exact game in VR, when I add VR, and if I want to use movement, I can add this, but I don't want to, so we'll not save this. So this is something that bindings are there. So for different devices, I can add different bindings under a same action. Then similarly for look, so look is basically where I'm able to look around through my mouse. So this is again a vector2 value, and then in this I have either, if I'm using the keyboard and mouse setting, then I'll have a pointer. So this is basically inside I think this is mouse pointer, delta mouse pointer. So this like you can check, like delta mouse pointer would not just be a mouse pointer. This would be your trackpad would be used, and all those things would come in this itself. And then you can also use more specific, like if I want to use mouse, and for mouse only I want to use delta, or for touch, for a pen kind of a device only I want to use delta. So all these things can also be created for specific, but right now it has been created for a general pointer kind of a device. So any pointing device will have this delta that can be used for looking around. Then similarly for if I'm using a gamepad, I'll just use a right stick to look around. Then for jump, I have a button value, and this button value is binded with space key, and either space key or button south in the gamepad. And then I also have control schemes here. So what are the control schemes? This is where my control schemes are there. I have gamepad, I have keyboard, mouse, I have PS4 or Xbox controller. So right now I have created few in the keyboard mouse. So if I check specifically, go and check for keyboard mouse, I have WASD, and I have look, for which I had delta pointer, I had jump, which was space key, and then in sprint I have left shift key, which is also which is a pass-through action, but you can use it as button as well. So this is how it's basically done here. This is how you define it, and then you save the asset. I will not save it because I don't want to use this, change anything right now. So I don't want it, but then we go again and all see. So yeah, so it's the same as how we left it. So this is how you define the asset. And then basically you can generate a C# class of this, which will basically generate functions for each of these. So there's different methods of using this. So like I said, there are different methods of actually when a button is pressed, how does Unity generate the message? How does Unity, how can I get it in my code that this button has been pressed? Button has been pressed, gamepad has been pressed, whatever. So there are different ways of doing that. And for that, let's go back here and look at the next thing. So default is any, I can, if I want to create a default scheme, I can choose keyboard, mouse, or gamepad or whatever. Then there's auto switch, which is basically by default when there's only a single player input. Like basically, is auto switch allowed between different platforms? Like if I just connect my gamepad and start playing, will it work, or should I have a specific setting where I have to go inside the settings and change this? So right now I can switch auto switch on, and then the default map, which map should be used. So I want to use the player map here for walking. So let's say I've created another in player input where I have created the code and everything for when the player is swimming, and that map is swimming. Then here in this default map, I will change this to swimming. Then this UI input and camera, we can talk about this later. And then basically this behavior is how Unity is determining how the notification should be sent to the events that are happening. So when I press W, how does Unity send this to the code, or how do I actually write code based on this now. So for that, there are few different methods: send messages, broadcast messages, invoke Unity events, and invoke C-sharp scripts. So send messages is which is what is being used by default, which basically what it does is basically it will send. So we in our script you saw that we have move, look, jump, and sprint, 4 kind of actions that are there. And if you look here, what it is saying is basically it is sending messages for on-device lost, on-device regained, on-controls changed. So these are 3 simple messages, straightforward messages that are being passed. And apart from that, we have on move, on look, on jump, and on sprint. So these are 4 methods that will be called whenever something happens. So when I press W, an on move method will be called. So this is what it means by send message. Broadcast message is another way, which I'm unclear of right now. I'll look into this. Then there's invoke Unity events. So we have not done events till now, but this basically is that there's specific that you can subscribe to something and then desubscribe to that. So that something is an event. Basically, you subscribe to an event and we can name those events. So like if I invoke events, then I can create these events. For player, I have specific what function should be called. So like I think we have seen this when we were creating buttons. So things like this, right? So it's similar to that. Like so we when we have buttons, we are basically subscribing to a specific event. So we can do this. So like if I do this, what I'll do is I'll write a code here somewhere, another code where I will, for a move function, I'll specifically have that object attached. And actually, I can just show you how that also can be done. So for send messages, we have on move, on log, on jump, and on sprint. Where are these methods? These methods right now are in this starter assets inputs script. So yeah, so this is basically where these methods are: on move, on look, on jump, on sprint. So what I can do is basically if I want to change this from send messages to invoke Unity events, what I can do is take this only, and in this in function I can write player starter assets input, and I can call it's a private function, no, it's a public function. Player capsule starter assets input. Not able to I think something's wrong, but this is the way that it should be. I can enable and start by check. Oh, I think something because of this we are not able to see it, but should be there. Like what I can do is basically create a function which is similar to on move, and if I create this function somewhere else, then I can get this value here on whatever is I'm doing in on move. So what I'm doing in on move is basically I'm getting this value of 2 where this value I'm setting this value in the move input script. In the move input script, I'm just setting the direction in the move vector 2, and this move vector 2 is a public vector 2, and this vector 2 can be accessed in another script where the actual walking and actual everything is happening. So I can basically call this function itself, move input, and then that should work. So I have a move input function, I hope. Move input is also not here. For some reason, jump input is here. But yeah, so I can create those functions as well. We can do that separately and see. But for now, just understand that this is how it can be done, and we can actually see and implement this at a later stage if you want. And next, lastly, we have you invoke C# events. which basically would be used if we basically create these from this. If we actually generate the C# code, and then I have a C# file, then I'll be able to use the C# events. But the easiest way, the very straightforward way, is to use send messages, and you can read more on this as well. But the very straightforward method is basically this. So what this will do is it will send message only to the scripts attached to this player itself, nowhere else. So scripts attached here only it will send. So on look, on move, all these are there in this. In this, what we are doing is setting the value of move, look, jump, and sprint. From these values, this script is taking those public values and basically moving in that direction, or based on if it is jumping, then jumping, if it is sprint, then changing the speed to sprint. And we can see this script as well. So basically what it is doing is creating a this class, public class called as input. So this is the starter assets input class, which has all these functions: move, look, jump, and sprint, which is basically setting these values. So it creates a input variable of that class. And from these variables, then I'm able to, let me show you what is happening next. So I'm able to camera rotation, move. So this is what is happening when I'm moving. I'm setting the target speed. This is basically a conditional statement that if input sprint is active, like is the script sprint activated, true or false. If it is true, then the speed should be sprint speed, target speed should be sprint speed. If it is not, then the target speed should be move speed. And then it is basically checking the direction, setting the direction, all those things based on the input.move or then input.jump. And these are the variables that we have created here: move, jump, sprint, and look. So this is how it is being, the whole thing is being accessed here. So I hope this is, if not 100% clear, a bit clear. We can have another separate session where we specifically talk about input actions in a completely different context, not in the context of first player controller and seeing the actual existing scripts. We can start from scratch. We can build our own actions, which we'll also do in this to create shooting actions, because we don't have that here right now. So we'll check this in this as well. And next, let's talk about, for now, I'll just delete this again. And I'll add the third person controller and look at it. So for adding the third person controller, I can do reset third person controller amateur. And this is my third person controller. If I go into play mode, I'm able to, as it is, access this. And this is generally how your third person characters are supposed to be, right? Like third person games, you will generally see a player being followed by a camera which is a bit behind them, and then you can move around, you can see the player itself. So this is generally how third person setup is there. But as you see right now, what it's having is a bit of a generalized thing that is there. But let's try and change that. What we'll do is, now we'll come to a site called as Mixamo. So Mixamo is a site by Adobe, which gives us some characters and some animations. I think I'm logged out. So what I'm trying to do with Mixamo is basically, I want to replace, like, so this is not what I'll use in my actual game, right? Like, this is an asset that Unity has provided, and this does not have a face. This does not really have any good character. So this is not what I'll be using when I actually play the game. So for that, what I would want is some other character. So Vixamo provides me with a lot of characters here. So I can use any character from here. And then I can also get some animations, which also we'll see sometime in the next few sessions. We'll also come back to this and see what different animations and how to implement those animations. But for now, what I want to do is just basically use this character and replace that standard model with this character. So I'll just click on download, and format I will keep FBX for Unity, and pose either T-pose or original pose, does not matter, and then just click on download. I think I have already downloaded it, but let me see. Yeah, I already have this as character.fbx. So I'll just go to downloads. This is there. So let me just bring that to Unity, and I will create a new folder for 3D models. So when I bring this to Unity, I see that basically so this is just the FBX file. So FBX is a format for a 3D model, which has some materials and stuff already inside it. But as you can see, the materials has not been placed. So what I'll do is I want to first extract materials. Inside the 3D models, I'll create a new folder called as mat, and select this folder. So this is where the material has been extracted. And then I have to extract the textures. For that, I'll do text. Select this folder. This will create the textures. And hopefully now my model is good looking. It's not. Embedded materials. What I can do is basically on this characters model. So what I'll have to do is on this material. So this is the material that is being used. I can log this. I want to go in this file. I want to add the albedo, which would be this thing, and a normal map, which is this thing. I can fix this. Glossiness would go in metallic. And let me see if this, yeah. So this is how we set up. Like I can see that my character is now as I would want it to look, right? And this is something that is called as a T-pose. So generally when we create 3D characters or 3D models of humanoids, this is a general pose to create it in. And because animations and rigging and everything works well with this. Another thing that we have to do here is, let me delete this for now, is when we import it, this is log. So this material thing is done. If it's not clear, let me just go back to it again. So what I've done first is basically extracted materials, and this material was attached to the 3D model itself. Then I extracted some textures that came along with it. Textures mein kya tha? We had diffuse. So this is an unwrapped texture. Basically, it's a lot of concepts of 3D modeling, but this is how it's generally done. We will have several different files for creating a texture. One will be an unwrapped, just a texture, which is your something called as an albedo or a diffuse image, or some, like, people call it different names. I am not very familiar with 3D modeling, but this is a general concept. And then you have a normal image, which is like defining how light should be allowed to pass or refract, these kinds of things, like baking the light around the model. And then we had a glossiness, which is like how metallic should that be. And then we had one more thing, which I don't know where it was, probably would make our model look more better. And then we basically, what we did in our material, we applied those things here. So I think, and for doing that, what we did, because we wanted to go to another folder, and once we click here, we could have gone there. Another way of doing that, if I click here, if I click this, then that goes away. So for that, what we did is choose this, and there's a lock here. So when I click on this lock, wherever I go, select anything, this thing would stay as is. So that is why I can go to this folder, and I picked up the albedo, the metallic, and those things and placed it here. And if I want, I think I can place specular in one of these things. There is a mapping between these things, which I am not aware of, but I'm sure there must be resources online which we can look at and understand this. But normal was straightforward, smoothiness, metallic texture, and smooth glossiness was straightforward. And this was the mean texture or the diffuse image, which actually goes in an albedo, which actually defines which part of the object should be which color. So this was pretty straightforward. I'm not sure about this. So that was about applying the material. And then again, going back to the 3D character, what we want is go to rig and make sure that this animation type in the rig is a humanoid and apply it. So for what this does is basically inside this, it creates this character and animator as well. So that's it for now for basically adding the, so this is only the import process. Now, how do I change this? So where is this character? First, I want to see that it's inside the player armature, inside geometry in this. So if I turn this off, this is the actual player character. And then there's skeleton as well, which I'm not concerned with right now. So I'll just delete this. And I think I'll have to open the prefab. So I'll do that prefab and unpack completely. And then I'll delete this and add my character inside the geometry. And my character is in place. Everything is fine. And then what I want to change next is go to player armature, and avatar here in the animator. We'll talk about what animator is, what it does, and all those things later. But inside the animator, avatar, I have to change to the avatar that I'm using, which was the character avatar. And that's it. So this is the process of changing from the standard assets 3D character to getting your asset to work inside this. So like, as you can see now, I am able to use the animations of the character as is. Everything is working. Why? Because this rig is similar to what the original rig is. And what is a rig? If I can show you, how can I show you? I think this I can show. No, this was the configure avatar. So this is a rig. The bones kind of a structure that you see. So these are what defines the different joints inside a character, and based on these joints is what the animation is being done. So why did our character that we downloaded and the character that Unity gave by default work without any changing of rigging? Is because we had a similar rigging pattern. So that's it. And again, back here, we are able to move around and play around in the scene. So yeah, so that's it, I guess, for today's session. We have covered the starter assets, new input system, and Mixamo for 3D characters. So this is an important site for your prototyping stuff and a lot of different things. So if you are making a personal project or small project, I'm not sure about the commercial usage, but I think you can check that out. And then we'll discuss the remaining things in the next session, and then also start building the game and stuff, because we have not actually started with that yet. So yeah, that's all for today. Are there any doubts or anything? Okay, fine. So I will take my leave now. I'll stop the recording.